Hello everybody, welcome back. This is your tropical update for August 29th. We're currently watching Category 1 Hurricane Idalia making its way towards the Florida Gulf Coast, where hurricane and storm surge warnings are in effect. We're expecting significant impacts for those areas. We're also watching Category 3 Major Hurricane Franklin near Bermuda, Tropical Depression 11, which just formed, as well as an area of interest over the eastern Atlantic. Here's that area of interest. We won't talk about that much at all. Here's Tropical Depression 11. We won't talk much about that at all. Here's the island of Bermuda, and here is Major Hurricane Franklin right next to it with a large eye and a very annular circular structure associated with it. Meanwhile, here is Idalia with its outer bands just now reaching southwestern Florida and the Florida Keys, with those bands extending down into Cuba, where the tropical storm and hurricane warnings have been removed as the storm moves away from those areas, that is Cuba and the Yucatan, and makes its way into the Florida Big Bend area. We'll talk more about that here shortly. Here's the latest impact map now revised for what we have to deal with today. Is we see Idalia moving in. We see Franklin moving around, Tropical Depression 11 moving up, this system moving out and up as well. Idalia in the near term will make landfall in the Florida Big Bend. After that, likely riding the coastline. Probably not quite like that. Let's undo that. Probably more like I don't know, something like this to the north of that purple area. Ride the coastline, come out like it's going to hit Bermuda, and then we have two different tracks. One takes it out to sea, the other brings it kind of down, around, and then out to sea. At least I hope it goes out to sea. You'll see here in a second some models actually bring it back in towards Florida, which would be not good at all. Here is the European ensemble for Idalia, as we can see here, up into the Florida Panhandle, or at least the Big Bend area. It looks like trends are moving more west. I guess I should act like I'm using the camera more west to the Panhandle area, up the coast, like I said, and then out towards Bermuda, and then either out to sea or down around, and then probably not back towards the coast, but eventually out to sea as well. Franklin out to sea, this storm out to sea, and Tropical Depression 11 also out to sea. Here is the update on Hurricane Idalia, looking very healthy on satellite today, with the center moving towards the center of the cold cloud tops, which means we might see an eye on satellite form soon. You can see an eye on the radar. I don't have it that big, but the eye's down in here somewhere. Here is the composite radar for the United States here. Like I mentioned, those outer bands now moving inland over southern Florida and the Keys. As a result, we could see some tornadoes there, and later this evening, perhaps Tampa and Orlando as well. We could see some major impacts. It's currently at 90 miles an hour. That's a high-end Cat 1. Just a few more miles an hour, we'll be at Cat 2, and then not far from that, Cat 3. Major hurricane impacts likely here to the Florida coast. I would not be surprised if we see a little push of the cone, instead of going like this, to maybe go something more to the north, like that. Maybe not quite that far, but somewhere, yeah, like that. That's kind of what I'm thinking at the moment. Again, tropical storm warnings basically for the entirety of the Florida Peninsula, except for like Miami, as well along the Panhandle into Georgia, South Carolina. Tropical storm watches also up into North Carolina as well. Like I mentioned, it's then going to move out towards Bermuda, and there's kind of two options here. One is it moves up and out to sea. The other one is it kind of sits here for a few days and also theoretically will go back out to sea, maybe with more of a push like that to scale there. So again, we'll see exactly what happens. Regardless, heavy surf expected across the seaboard, also due to Franklin at the moment. Again, major hurricane alert in effect from Perry to Spring Hill, Florida, where we could see major hurricane impacts, especially due to those storm surge warnings. We're looking at everywhere from Inglewood to Indian Pass. We'll talk about that more here in a second when we get to the storm surge updates. Speaking of storm surge, the Hurricane Center now upping it from 11 feet to 15 feet of storm surge now possible in areas of the Big Bend. We're looking at winds sustained to 125, gusts to 155. That's Category 5 gusts. just to hammer that point home, Category 5 gusts, 15 feet of storm surge. Thankfully, the storm's going to be moving somewhat quickly, so we're only looking at a foot of rain, which is still a lot of rain, especially if you don't have power, and especially if your housing is destroyed by 125 plus mile an hour winds. We also have the potential for several tornadoes. We'll talk about that here in a second when we get to the Storm Prediction Center forecast. As you can see, almost all of the models bear rapid intensification through the next 12 to 24 hours until landfall along the Florida coast, which will happen a little over 24 hours from this morning. And that's what we're looking at. The models have gotten more centralized in their location. The Hurricane Center does, in fact, bring this to a high-end Cat 3. As I mentioned, and as you saw at the very beginning of the video, a high-end Cat or a medium-range Cat 4 is not out of the question. Almost all of the dynamical models, the H-Wharf, the HAFS B, all of them have this system in the 100 to 110 plus range by the time it makes landfall in terms of knots, which really puts this as a high-end Cat 3, and that's what the Hurricane Center has projected for Idalia. So again, a high-end Cat 3, low-end Cat 4 landfall possible, and that's really not the big takeaway, although we will have major hurricane force winds over the course of the Big Bends. Hurricane force winds from the Big Bend around into Georgia and portions of South Carolina as well. We could also see gale force in orange and then tropical storm force in yellow. Outside of that, tropical storm force winds possible as far north as, again, Surf City, North Carolina, where tropical storm watches are in effect. And again, tropical storm warnings also in effect for areas south of the South Santee River. South Santee River is located here in South Carolina. As we talk about surge now from the mouth of St. Mary's River, that is the Florida-Georgia line, up the entire coast of Georgia in half. That is the southern coast of South Carolina, 2 to 4 feet of storm surge possible there, 1 to 3 feet from Surf City southward, and 1 to 3 feet from Flagler-Volusia County line northward. We're also looking at minimal storm surge south of Chokoloskee, including much of the Everglades area, then 2 to 4 feet north of Chokoloskee up through Charlotte Harbor, Marco Island, Naples, and the like, to Inglewood, 3 to 5 from Inglewood to Longboat Key. Once we get to Inglewood, though, here, Inglewood northward, we're under a storm surge warning up until Indian Pass at the end of the Big Bend. Again, 4 to 7 feet from Longboat Key, including Tampa and Tampa Bay, all the way to the Anclote River, 6 to 9 feet from the Anclote River to Chescalwitha. 7 to 11 from Chescalwitha to Yankeetown, 10 to 15 feet. This is an extremely storm surge prone area. Again, I'm not exaggerating when I draw this right here. We could see storm surge that far inland on the map here. This is serious, 10 to 15 feet from Yankeetown to the Ancilla River, and then gradually moving away as we get from the center of the storm. You see stronger storm surge further south of the center landfall location. That's due to 2 factors. Number one, it's on the south side of the system. And so if you think about this, if a storm's rotating this way, which side is going to get the most water? Definitely this side. Say the center's right here. Definitely this side. Also, this area is more storm surge prone. That's just simply how it is, the nature of the waters down there and the land for that matter. You see significant rain likely all the way South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, as well as, of course, portions of Florida. You see the potential for extreme flooding rains possible. I guess major flooding rain is how it's termed here. Several tornadoes possible. You see a 5% risk over much of central Florida, including, and then moving into northern Florida, coastal Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina over the next day. This is today. This is tomorrow on Wednesday. And this is the overall forecast here from the Storm Prediction Center. Let's move on to Franklin real quick. Nothing too crazy here. You can't even see Bermuda, I don't think, on this. But you can down here. There's a tropical storm warning now in effect for the island. The storm will move north of the island come about Wednesday evening. And it'll make its closest call probably here within the next 24 hours or so. It'll then move out to sea, and after 3 days should become extratropical. Nonetheless, strong winds likely far to the north of where it no longer is a tropical cyclone. As it moves off to the side, we couldn't even see impacts to Atlantic Canada. And like I mentioned earlier, we're already seeing impacts down the eastern Atlantic seaboard due to high surf generated by this storm. Again, a very large 125 mile per hour hurricane, winds to 70 miles an hour possible in Bermuda. But again, nothing too crazy likely. Here's newly formed Tropical Depression 11 real quickly. Also, Bermuda. Bermuda is the popular person today. Moving generally northward, might become a tropical storm. This is Invest 92L that we've probably mentioned for the past few weeks. It kind of died out for a little bit. And here it is. If you looked at the satellite yesterday in the video, I thought it was already a tropical depression, is what it kind of looked like on satellite. But of course, I don't have the microwave passes and whatnot that the Hurricane Center does. Again, this storm could become a tropical storm at some point as well. We're also watching an area of interest over the eastern tropical Atlantic, 50% formation within the next 7 days. That's all for now. Chris Dixon, InfoWeather Media.